According to the American Alpine Club's 2019 State of Climbing report, only 1% of surveyed climbers identified as Black. Jordan Revis is trying to change that. This past winter, Jordan helped lead the first ever Black Intro to Ice Climbing workshop at the Mount Washington Valley Ice Fest, and he's part of the DEI committee with the Western Massachusetts Climbers Coalition, among other initiatives that he's involved with. For Jordan, it's a complicated position to be in, and has led to a lot of self-reflection. In this episode, we chat about things like, what does representation really mean? Concepts of identity and belonging, managing anxiety on and off the route, and balancing big goals with being kind to oneself. We'll get to our conversation after a quick message from our sponsors.
Hi, it's Katie McKinstry Stylos, and when it comes to winter climbing, having the right gloves can make or break your day on the ice. With Anu, you're in good hands, a small boutique brand founded by passionate climbers for climbers. The mission is simple, to create the best ice climbing and dry tooling gloves that are durable, dexterous, and waterproof. Personally, I can't imagine climbing any day on tools without my new gloves. Whether I'm on a steep pitch and highlight climbing in my Vincent lights, belaying in the bingo cave with my Vincent mitts, or climbing at my limit in the Dolomites of Italy. They're my reliable partner in the cold and on tools. Experience the difference with Anu. Check them out at anu.com.
We get it. For us, ice season never really ends. It just kind of blends between rock, plastic, and plywood until waterfalls freeze over again. No matter how you climb in the off-season, Furnace Industries keeps you going till your next bout of screaming barface. With their gym-safe dry ice evolutions, you can keep up your fitness indoors. And if you're looking to challenge yourself on your home wall, they have the largest variety of dry tooling holds in America. Check out their full lineup of ice and dry tooling gear at furnace-industries.com. Because for us, it's always ice season. You're on vacation, and it's been unseasonably hot. What have you been up to?
My vacation started July 4th, which was great. The July 4th and 5th were just kind of hanging out with my partner and stuff, just kind of celebrate that I'm leaving what I felt was a toxic job. And then my plan for that weekend was to go up and climb with Pat Cook up at Cathedral, and also Jackson Yip was in town.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. We were planning Saturday, Sunday, but the weather looked absolutely terrible Saturday. But so it goes for New England. It was actually pretty dry on Saturday, but I didn't end up going up. I went up Saturday night to Pat Cook's place in North Woodstock, and then me, him, and Jackson went out to Cathedral on Sunday, and it was balls hot, and it was just so sweaty and humid. We went up to the aeration buttress, and it was it was good. We had a really, all things said, we had a really good day. It was just so hot, and then that Monday I got out with Grant Simmons of Cathedral Mountain Guides, and we went up to Willard. We did Across the Universe, which was a pretty cool. Most of it's bolted, but I guess you can consider it a mixed climb. Pretty run out, old school stuff. 510A, I think. The 510A move is, if you're shorter than 6 foot, I don't even think it's possible. So I guess that one time that being taller is. This is going to be a hot take on being tall.
The one time being taller is beneficial. Give me a fucking break.
That was a hot take. But yeah, no, that was fun. It was definitely it was cooler, definitely up in Crawford Notch. But the sun was still beating on you. So that was a fun day. We did another route to the left of Across the Universe. I forgot what it was called. That was a fun, rompy, alpine-y climb, all slab.
That's the slab side that's facing Frankenstein, I guess?
No. So if you're going up towards the Highland Center and you see that slab kind of on the left side near the train tracks.
Oh, I've never actually been up there in the summer, or when it's not icy.
Right. That's what I was telling Grant. I was like, well, I've never climbed on a Willard ice before. I've only climbed at Frankenstein and then Cathedral in that area. So it was a nice introduction. The climbs are awesome, and if it's super hot down in Conway, go up to Willard and do some moderate slab, because it's going to be 20 degrees cooler, and it was great.
Oh wow, not bad.
Yeah.
Did you know Jackson before, like from his? Because I think he's from Massachusetts, right?
Yeah. So I met Jackson. I think it's going on 2 or 3 years ago at a Kragan Classic. I took a course he was or a clinic he was doing called I think it was like the fundamentals of on-siting. I might have gotten that name wrong, so I apologize. That's kind of how I met him, and we just kind of kicked it off from there. We were just having like really good conversations about being a person of color in the climbing community. He's out west now, and how different that is from the East Coast. And then, it took a while for us to climb again. He's been doing so much stuff over there on the West Coast. And I think he said it's been like a year and a half since he's even been back to the East Coast. So it was great to like see him in person again. We've talked on the phone a couple times throughout the years, but getting out and climbing with him was awesome. Great dude all around. And like every time I have a conversation with him, I come out feeling smarter and then also questioning the purpose of life and its meaning, which is a good thing. I count that as a good thing.
Yeah.
Just because of like the level that he is at as a person and how his thought process is. It's so awesome and fascinating to me. And like I'm not on that level, so sometimes I just feel like I'm like kind of sitting there with my mouth wide open. It just blows my mind like how smart he is as a person. And I feel like I'm really tooting his horn here. But it is true. And I listened to the podcast you did with him, and again, I don't know about how you felt about that, but I came out of it like I learned something, but I'm not sure exactly what I learned, but I know it was helpful.
He started it, I think, off the record. He's like, I don't want to give a lot of answers.
Mm-hmm.
I want listeners to leave with more questions.
Yeah.
I want this to be more like a Zen koan.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I think the goal achieved.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know him. It's an interesting dynamic about being a host because, we talk twice really.
Yeah.
And you get a sense of someone and I don't get that much more. And then there's, like maybe we continue chatting after the fact or not. But Jackson just seems like a very genuine, like very, 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 very thoughtful and introspective and caring individual. And I think like he's because of his analytical mind, he's so incisive. He can really kind of like cut to the core of things,
yeah.
which I found was particularly impressed by. Yeah, just very caring, I guess, is sort of like my my takeaway.
Yeah. Yes. I would 100% agree with that.
So speaking of guests, other guests that you've climbed with, that have also been on this podcast, you just linked up with Pat Cook, but you also climbed with Pat over the winter.
Yep.
And I think you were telling me that you went out to Lake Willoughby. And just for the listeners that might be coming into this episode, Pat holds a very special place in our heart here because he was our first guest ever. So thank you very much, Pat. Man, I sound super podcasty. What did you guys climb?
Oh God, I wish I could tell you. So it was my first time at Lake Willoughby, first time climbing with Pat. So he and I are both Arc'teryx Boston ambassadors for the Market Street store. Little plug there for Market Street. So from that, we just kind of connected. I've heard his name in the past. He's obviously been on a couple podcasts with you and First Ascent. So yeah, he invited me and one of his buddies, Neil, to go out to Lake Willoughby for a weekend. And I've only been ice climbing for like 4 years now, 4 or 5 years. And I've only really done like Frankenstein. I've done Rumney twice when it was in, which is super, super rare. And I've always heard about Lake Willoughby, how like it's just very different from Northeast climbing in general. So he was like, let's go out there. And he took us up some 4 plus, 2 pitches, 3 pitches, and then another 2-pitch climb. The second climb we did, he actually had to bail off of because like the ice was just so bad. That was like the story of the ice season this year. Like the ice all around was just terrible. But going back to the first time climbing with Pat, it was just like, it was probably the most like quintessential New England day you could have. It was like, it started off with like a bluebird day and all of a sudden just dumping snow on us with high winds while we're on like a middle pitch of a climb. And like all around, it was just so fun. Pat has like this calm demeanor to him that I very much enjoy. But yeah, it was just like an all around awesome day. And, from there, we've climbed to the gym a couple times. And then, like I said, we just went off the cathedral. But that's what I have to say about climbing at Lake Willoughby. I definitely want to go back. That's for sure. And I definitely want to go with Pat because that seems to be his go to. And I want to be able to climb harder ice. And I think, learning and like following him and his steps of how he goes about a climb is like how I kind of want to approach harder ice climbing.
Mm. I'm curious what it looked like observing him, because he strikes me as a very methodical, thoughtful climber. And I'm wondering what your impression was, because I actually haven't seen him climb, but that's what I've been told.
Yeah, methodical is probably the word I would use for him. He definitely assesses risk, and he's totally okay with saying like, I don't want to do this, or at least that's what it strikes for me. But I definitely think if he could avoid something that's like would be super sketchy or put like a partner in jeopardy if they're not at like a certain climbing level, I think he would be okay doing something totally different. But like just watching him climb, it's just like I'll go back to this past weekend where we were climbing They Died Laughing, which is a 5.9 on the north end of Cathedral, and the start was wet. There was a brown recluse, unbeknownst to him, in the first start hold or in the first couple starting holds. Freaked me out. I probably would have jumped off if that was me. But I mean, he's done the climb a lot, but like the way that he was just moving and kind of analyzing the climb, regardless that he's done it before, was just very methodical. And I want to get to that point in how I climb. That's like that's what I could say about climbing with Pat Cook, is that it's just he analyzes it in such a manner that like I want to say, because I can't think of a better word, it's just like a beautiful movement on the route. I think he'll disagree with me, but he's never. I don't think he's seen himself climb a whole route before.
How would you describe your climbing style?
Oh God. I would say mine is changing. I have terrible, absolutely shit footwork, and I've really been working on it. I would say that I am kind of more of like a brute. I kind of just like brute through things instead of methodically like going through it. And I'm really trying to change that because you can't really brute yourself through hand jamming and crack climbing. That's worked in the past if you're just like face climbing. I don't climb at like a super high level. Levels of climbing are very subjective. For me, I consider myself like 512A like high level of climbing, 512A and above. And I don't generally climb at that level. I generally climb within the 511 range for sport. And I'm trying to get to that point in my trad climbing ability, at least 511A. And I'm really having to like figure out how to like think about it before I do it. Because especially when it comes to trad climbing, like the gear is so good nowadays, right? Like I took a whip on a 0.75 this past weekend, micro Z4. That was a big step for me. Like falling on gear has always been, when I started climbing, was like, don't do that. Like that is absolutely terrible because it's going to rip out. And it's like, yeah, like it totally can. But a lot of my thinking recently has been like, okay, well, I don't know who placed this bolt. It could be like a bolt that's like half an inch long that's actually in there. Or like we clip pitons all the time, right? Those things have been there for, I don't know, 30 to 50 years, and we still trust them. I'm not going to whip on a pin, but I'm still going to like mentally going to trust it. So a lot of it has been like shifting my climbing style to be more methodical and analyzing the climb more, because a lot of it is my headspace when it comes to that, like, oh, I don't want to fall here. I don't want to fall here, which is just a natural fear, right? We naturally we come out of the womb not wanting to fall, or we hate heights, right? So kind of like trying to switch that, thinking like, yes, I'm going to fall. It's going to be scary, but I know I'm going to be safe. I should say relatively safe, because climbing is inherently dangerous. And I think that's really been working for me. Like last year, if I pinpointed They Died Laughing, and 5.9 at Cathedral is, I don't want to say sandbagged, because I don't think anybody that climbs a cathedral thinks that they are sandbagged, but I would say they are just a different style and like way of coming at climbing. 5.9 also anywhere is just a really weird grade in general. And last year, I probably wouldn't even have wanted to even pink point or even top rope. They died laughing. And this year, I was just like, yeah, I'll try it out. So that's like, again, working on my climbing head.
I guess I'm wondering about like other ways that you've approached that. Are you doing like fall practice and like climbing gym, going a few moves above your last clip and things like that just to sort of like get used to it? Or is it mostly, or do you find that translates to outdoors, or are you focusing more on like your outdoor climbing?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest contributor to my lead head getting better has actually been climbing ice, surprisingly.
Oh, okay.
Because I've also thought about this so many times of like how, like, why am I feeling more comfortable now than I was at the same time last year? And I've definitely been training more. Like, I do weights twice a week. I do a pretty light hangboard and pinch block workout twice a week. And then I do a moon board and tension board workout twice a week. So I actually don't even go down ropes that often during the week. And I do sometimes, whether with my partner Juliet or like friends that ask me if they want to climb. Most of the time, I just do like, power endurance on the tension board and then just climb on the moon board. Things are absolutely ridiculous, but it has made me a stronger climber. But I like what really has helped my lead head has been ice climbing, because it's definitely scary, especially when you're first like leading, because again, people tell you not to fall on ice screws or fall at all. So you're already having that which obviously you don't want to fall on ice screws. You have a lot of pointy things going around with you. But like when that preconceived notion of like, don't fall or else like the worst thing is going to happen to you, when that's in the back of your head, like I think that at least for me, that causes me to have a little bit more anxiety on the climb, which like, everybody comes at that differently. I don't know if saying like you should never fall is this is going to be a hot take too, is the right way to come about it. Or you can come about as like ice climbing is very dangerous. If you're going to lead a climb, make sure you really know that climb and you are feeling comfortable. I'm a very risk averse person, so I'm not going to do something just because someone told me to do it. I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'll take a look at it, but I might be like, actually, do you mind like leading this so I can like top rope it first, and then like kind of suss out the moves. The one the one time though that I actually did kind of just go for it was last year. I was climbing with Janet Wilkinson and we went to standard route at Frankenstein, and I did the first pitch, and then she came up to the cave part and she was just like, hey, do you want to lead the rest of it? You look super good on that first pitch, so like I have full confidence in you. And like full disclosure, like the first time I ever actually led a pitch was the weekend before, and it was a WI1.
Oh, wow.
So I went from WI1 to then WI3 plus, depending on the conditions.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like dripping wet, the shitty ice that was just like dripping everywhere. I have so much respect for Janet and who she is as a climber and who she is as a person, that I felt that if she had that much confidence in me, and also the experience that she has, like I just felt I was in a very comfortable space where that she thought and knew that my ability could be that I could lead this next pitch, which I ended up leading the rest of the climb. But I think it comes to the people you climb with, surrounding yourself with like the people who will boost you up and make you feel comfortable as a climber. And if you say no, like they're going to be okay with that. But like coming back to it after that, I just felt myself like I'm actually stronger than I thought. So I can probably climb better. I come at it of like, again, I'm risk averse, which I think might be detrimental in the sense of like, oh, I don't want to try that move because I'm like scared to do it because I don't want to get hurt. Because if I get hurt, then I won't be able to work. If I don't work, I won't be able to make money or pay off my loans. So like all of that whole like train of thought comes into my mind, which is all still true, right? It's all still true because climbing is inherently dangerous, but I would like to be a guide. And if I haven't tried climbing hard in a safe manner, how could I, mentor somebody who's also trying to do the same thing or have a certain perspective on approaching that way of climbing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think maybe we can unpack that a bit because
Yeah.
there's a lot in there. Because what I find interesting is that you really gravitate towards Pat's calmness. I think that was sort of like the first thing that you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of his like analytical approach and just his confidence just like back off when he doesn't feel it. And
Mm-hmm.
this sort of spiraling thoughts that can kind of creep in when you're climbing. This idea of like control of the situation and being able to evaluate the risk factors perceived and then like real. And I'm wondering how are you thinking about that now? And then like how did that play into like wanting to become a guide?
I would say there are two different questions. The first question was more about like how have I like seen how others climb their calmness and collectiveness when they're in a sticky situation. The biggest thing that's, and this is going to sound so rudimentary, but it's so like true, is just take a deep breath and then look at your next moves, right? A good example of this is this happened this past Monday. It was we were on Across the Universe, and I was on like a weird slab part, and I don't think I was on the right route. So it was just kind of like I wasn't on the right way to get to the next bolt. And it was just one of those things where like the bolt is right there, but it's too far away for me to like clip it because I was putting up the draws. I kind of stun locked myself because I was like, okay, if I move, I'm probably going to slip. But it just came to me just taking a deep breath, looking at it, looking at the rock, understanding that like I can do this, kind of talking yourself up, taking that deep breath, bringing the heart rate down, talking yourself up, being like, I can do this. It's right there. Understanding the repercussions if I was to fall. So like, it's a slab. So if I sense myself falling, I can just turn around and start running down. But also the fact that I was with somebody who I really, really trust belaying, right? And this is going to kind of get into the whole guiding thing too. I made like a small adjustment in my feet and I was able to clip the bolt no problem. And I was kind of having this conversation with Grant. He, was like, oh, good job on that. Like, you made a good small adjustment, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I really trusted you as my belayer. And he was like, yeah, that's something, I don't really remember the exact conversation, but it came to the point of like, that's something that, when you're a guide, sometimes we're taking people up that might not be as a seasoned belayer, right? Or they're belaying for the first time. So that's like an inherent risk that I'm taking and analyzing. And I think he mentioned one thing where now he really makes sure that like the belayer really knows how to belay before he goes on a climb with them. It's one of those things. Everyone obviously takes their own risks and has their opinions and how they come about guiding and climbing in general. But that's like kind of one thing that being wanting to be a guide, is understanding that not everybody is a seasoned belayer as these people that I go out with. So I really need to work on my own understanding that I can do this, doing the climbs, first of all, that I want to do with the clients and like getting that beta down, right? So that I know that I can do it, but also putting my belayer in a situation where they're not going to be potentially catching a fall from me, right? That's always a possibility. There's always a possibility of slipping. There's always a possibility of like this, that, and the other thing. But setting everybody up for like a perfect day out.
Yeah. But the thing is, when you're guiding now, you now have to think about a lot more variables, right?
Yeah.
And so then there's a multiplied complexity. And I'm wondering how does that play into how you're evaluating situations and how you approach that from both like an analytical perspective, but also like maybe potentially like runaway ideas too.
I think not having a big ego.
Yeah.
And knowing that I can pull on a piece of gear. Say it was something like this past weekend where part of the climb was like not great. It was wet. Or like it's just a move that like it'll take me a long time to get through, and like I'm not here to climb for myself. I'm here to like give the experience to my client. Being okay with saying like I don't have to send this. I can just pull on this piece of gear, get up to the next belay station, and then have my client like have fun with it. Obviously, if it's something where it's a hard climb relative to the person that I'm guiding, I'd have that conversation with them, understanding where they are in their climbing journey. I wouldn't put them on something where I might have to pull on a piece of gear, which is still a
Yeah.
possibility, even if it's like a moderate climb. But like that's also something where I would have to evaluate. Okay, it rained yesterday. There's a whole single pitch that's just in a streak of water. I understand you want to do this climb, but like it might not be the safest thing to do right now. Again, I just want to emphasize this is how I would approach it. Is that like I want to make sure it's something that both of us can have a good time doing, and like me being okay with like placing a piece of gear, placing a quick draw and pulling on it, just getting through like this hard section because it's not for me, it's for my client.
We're going to change the direction a bit because going back to this past winter, that's actually how I came across the work that you're doing, because you helped to lead the first ever Black Intro to Ice Climbing workshop at the Mount Washington Valley Ice Fest. I'm curious, how did that event come together?
That was all Marty Fuller. She's been a huge advocate and just person in the BIPOC space of New England climbing for a number of years now. And I might not get these numbers right, but I think around 3 years ago, she started a BIPOC Intro to Ice clinic at the Mount Washington Valley Ice Fest. That was around the same time that I started climbing, but I actually didn't take the course. I think that year I took an Intro to Mountaineering course, which is awesome. I suggest everybody take that course regardless of who you are. If you're just a winter hiker, you should definitely take that course. It wasn't until, because I was still living in Connecticut at that time, it wasn't until I want to say, I think about a year ago when I actually met Marty. It was through a Zoom call, but I moved up to Boston, the Boston area, and it was getting more into just working more in the DEI space. I started working with the WMCC, which is the local climbing organization for Massachusetts, specifically on their JDEI committee. I forgot how I got connected with Marty, but I think it might have been Janet, actually. It was Janet Wilkinson, who connected us. From there, I really, really liked the work that she was doing in the area. And she's more of a hiker. She does climb as well. She also does backcountry, BIPOC stuff, everything. Literally anything you can think of, she's had her hand in it and helping to make it a more diverse community for the outdoors. So last year at Flash Foxy, I was in the area just to climb. I stopped by the event. I had some friends that were there, so I stopped by and I saw her, and she asked if I wanted to help out with the Black Ice Clinic. And I just got my AMGA single pitch instructor certification, I think literally the weekend before, if not like 2 weekends before. So it was just something that really came together. She did all the legwork, and I literally just had to show up and teach, which was awesome. And I thank her so much for that. It came together beautifully. I think we had like 8 participants, which is awesome. It was the first one, as you mentioned, I think in New England or maybe in the Northeast ever. And it was just a beautiful, I haven't been around that many Black people in the outdoors ever before. And I had to reflect a lot on it afterwards because I've never been in that space. I grew up in a very white community in Connecticut, and usually I'm always the Black person in the group. And that continues in the climbing community today. But it was just such a beautiful experience. Another guide, Kelsey Rex, she helped out with the clinic as well. She was great and was like, I'm going to step away. Anything you need help with, let me know. She was awesome to work with. And yeah, there's just no words to like that I can think of that really construed about how amazing of a clinic and time and event that was, bringing those people together. And one thing that really stuck out to me was there was a comment from one of the participants. They said it was like it was nice to be learning from a Black person. I think I was teaching how to belay, but even in that space, there's not a lot of us out there, especially when it comes to ice climbing. There's obviously a little bit more nuances to ice climbing. You have to watch out for ice fall and all of that. But like that comment, I've never heard of ever. And I've never thought of either because I've never been in a situation where I've learned from a Black person. So that really gave a sense of purpose, more purpose to what I was doing and how I could really positively impact the diversity of ice climbing or just outdoors in general in New England. And that sounds kind of egotistical, but, or maybe it doesn't, I don't know. But it just, that's the reason that I'm doing this and I want to do it. I don't think there's anything more I can say about that. Yeah.
Are there, I mean, I guess, like, what does the Black outdoor leadership community look like specifically for like climbing and ice climbing? Because you mentioned like Marty and then yourself. I guess I'm just wondering, like, are there many other folks that can sort of like lead these types of events?
So there is Outdoor Afro, and Marty does a lot of work with them and putting on these events. I'm not too heavily involved in Outdoor Afro. I probably should be, and I want to be, but from like from the climbing perspective, especially the ice perspective, there really isn't a lot. You know, there's a friend of mine, Colin, down in Rhode Island. He's been ice climbing for, I don't know, 10 years now. Colin, you can correct me on that. He's obviously been ice climbing way longer than I have. And, you know, he has some of the same stories that I have. He's only learned from white people, and which is not a problem, right? That's just the nature of the New England and in the climbing community, especially 10 years ago. And he also helped out with the Black Ice Clinic as well, I should mention. There really isn't a lot. And the more and more that we do these clinics and these meetups, I think there's going to be more leaders emerging. There's definitely a couple that are right there. They're ready for it. One of them is finishing his PhD. So obviously that takes a lot of time, and others have life things, right? So unlike me, their whole life isn't about climbing. Well, I wouldn't say my whole life is about climbing, but a good portion of it is about climbing. So, like, you know, to ask somebody to be a leader in something that may not have their full heart into is tough. I would never put somebody in that position. So, you know, I feel like it has to be a natural progression. And sometimes people need a push to it, right? Sometimes that push is like, I think you could be a great leader, even if you just do like these one things sometimes. But like the representation is real. Like it definitely is something that I think would benefit having more leaders in the community, because, you know, Marty has been doing it for so long, and like she just keeps adding and adding and adding, and like amazing, but one person can only do so much, right? And that's the reason I mentioned before is I would like to start, you know, a gym, like a monthly gym meetup for, you know, Black climbers, increase the community, get us to know each other more. So that's easier to do these events, because someone might be like, oh yeah, I can totally take that on, instead of, you know, me or Marty being like, all right, I'm going to put this on. Like it could be a more organic thing now, especially with the amount of people, you know, there still isn't a lot, right? But I think there was a recent survey that came out that said, I think 1% of climbers are Black.
Oh, wow. This is in the US?
Yeah.
Oh.
So like inherently, there just aren't a lot of us. And I'm also not trying to be like, I want people of color to experience the outdoors, but I don't want to force somebody to do it, right? I don't want to be like, hey, you should come do this. Like I want to have that conversation with you and really understand, like, is this something you would be into? So that's my take on leadership in the Black community of New England. I'm sure others have different takes on it, but right now, realistically, I think Marty and like some others are really the drivers of it, and I would like there to be more. I'm trying. Obviously, Marty is trying and doing it. I think we just need to be able to like really make that community bigger, and like a friendship between all of us. We do have a WhatsApp group, so it's not very active, but we do talk to each other sometimes.
You've mentioned a few times growing up in Connecticut and then, you know, sort of being like the only Black person around. And I don't know if you want to name the town. Do you care?
No, I don't care.
Okay,
I grew up in
so I
some.
know that you grew up in Southington, and there
Yeah,
because we talked about this before, and a very preppy thing to say is that we used to play you in lacrosse. I'm from Lincoln Sudbury. If anyone wants to
yeah.
look that up and the collective median annual income, so we used to play you in lacrosse, and I know you played too. This is a deviation, but what position were you?
I was a defensive midi, but
Damn
I
right,
was yeah, but
damn
I was
right.
so aggressive that I
Yeah,
got my D pull taken away from me. D pull meaning defensive pull
yeah.
for those with dirty minds out there, which is a longer shaft than a regular lacrosse stick. So many innuendos right there. Um,
This is why it's such a broy sport. It's like baked into it.
yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about because I was thinking about this question last night, and it kind of came up this past weekend about like white sports, right?
Mm.
Lacrosse definitely is seen as one of them. I swam longer than I played lacrosse, and swimming, obviously there's the terrible stereotypes that people have of black people in swimming. And, I kind of grew up with those jokes my whole life,
Mm.
right? My stroke was the breaststroke and the butterfly, which are seen as a little bit more advanced strokes. The butterfly more than the breaststroke, but I think about the opportunities that I was given and enabled me to do these quote unquote white sports. The YMCA and the scholarships that I was able to do for it. Lacrosse was fully funded by my mom, who to this day I still don't know how she did it because it's, as you know, a very expensive sport. And is it because of the community I grew up with? Most likely, like the socioeconomics of Sulington is 99% white, right? So I think it's more diverse now. But when I was growing up there, it was not very diverse. And I've said this in a podcast before, but I would walk down like our local rails to trails and just be shouted the N word at me, right?
Oh well.
So yeah, but like those weren't my friends, right? Those are just random people that were ignorant, right? They didn't know who I was as a person. So like, I contrast myself to where I'm at now. Obviously climbing is still considered a pretty white sport, but it's definitely getting more diverse, especially everything that like, so many people are doing. Marty, Kai Leitner. It's also, for me, I've worried about how I can connect with other people of color, specifically black people who came from a more black community. And again, this could be because of how I think about myself and like the anxiety that I bring to myself and overthinking. But like, how can I connect to these other people if I haven't had the same upbringing as them? Because the way I look at myself, and I've been reminded of my blackness in my hometown since I was a kid, but I still grew up in a very white community. And the term that's always been coined is I am the whitest black person that
Mm.
some of my friends know. And I still struggle with like what does that actually mean? But like now that kind of takes a toll on me because I
Mm.
am like, yeah, is there some merit in that? Because like I haven't, I grew up. My mom has never owned a house. I grew up moving place to place. I am estranged from my dad, so the very stereotypical right black upbringing, but it was in a white community. So I feel like I don't have anything to really relate to people who have grown up, maybe in a city or in a more black community. So I think that's kind of weighed on me a little bit, especially doing these black specific clinics because I feel like I don't represent in where they're coming from, even though I do, right? Like I probably do, but do I? So I don't. I think we got a little into the weeds there with that question, but it kind of roots from the fact that I played all these white sports and it was such a white community. Like where do I fit in the black community?
I'm thinking about my own experience because I'm half Japanese,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom was telling me because she's Japanese. She grew up in Connecticut too, and she was like the only Japanese person, and she would get heckled or beat up and things like that. And she was adopted, and so she, growing up, she talks about it, and she doesn't gloss over it, but like it doesn't seem like it's framed her in a very like fundamental way, where like sometimes she'll say that she walks into the bathroom in the morning and she'll look in the mirror and she'll be like, oh, who's that like Japanese person looking back at me? And so there's like this very like losing the visual concept of self, I guess, or like the presentation of race, and then just sort of like just being in that like white space, like but then like there's always that visual reminder, I guess. And so it's like this kind of dichotomy, this separation of identity.
So Jackson and I we were climbing last weekend, and we went to the gym when he was here, and we were kind of talking about like race and climbing, and he's a person of color who grew up in Massachusetts, and we both kind of agreed that race wasn't really, like, for me, race was kind of always there, but I just kind of poo-pooed it because I grew up with a white mom. So I didn't really know how to handle those situations. But I kind of like, when we're talking about climbing, I've been doing it for so long, right? On and off for almost 20 or longer than 20 years now. But race didn't really become a thing until 2020. It wasn't like, oh man, you're a black guy that climbs, right? My experiences in climbing, and I just want to say my experiences because others have had other experiences in nature and at climbing areas. I haven't really had the, oh, you're black, you're climbing? Whoa, that's cool. Or like the white, like, know-it-all savior of like, this is my crag, this is how you need to do things. But I've never had the experience that others have had, that like my race has never come up when I've been climbing, other than me noticing that I'm the only black person at the crag. And this is such a much bigger conversation. And I know like the one thing that I would like to get away from, or not necessarily get away from, but like be able to have these conversations about climbing and not necessarily have my race the center of the conversation or kind of what starts it off. But also understanding that like, when we talk about the first Black Intro to Ice Clinic, like that's a really big deal and that needs to be talked about. But when it comes to like, if I'm just going out ice climbing, like I just want to be a person that goes ice climbing.
I mean, I guess like what is interesting is the dynamic of the feedback you got, which was, it was so nice to be able to take this course with like a black instructor. I think that's what you said. Mm-hmm. And then you're on the receiving end and you're like, well, do I actually like represent your shared experience? And so it's like feeling of belonging and like, am I actually representative of? And there's the outward physical appearance, but then there's also the lived experience. And I guess I wonder like, how much does that actually matter in that environment? Because you are able to provide that environment for the attendees and to be that leader and that mentor. And I assume like being able to provide that opportunity it far outweighs anything other not having it.
Yeah. Again, it's all internal. Like if we just look at it on the face value, like that person was more receptive of the teaching because they were learning from somebody who looked like them.
Yeah.
And like that might be all that matters to that person. Where to me, I'm looking at it in a more existential way of like, but I want to be able to have a conversation with you as well about who you are as a person. And maybe that's how I get to understand people's lived experiences versus mine.
Has that experience shaped how you've approached like other black climbers, like as you're getting together, like in events or in I don't know if you have like mentees and things like that roles, like, are you making more of a conscious decision to sort of like just get to know the other person? And
yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, right? Going back to that specific black clinic, I think I felt more inclined to like talk to the participants. We also had like a little gathering afterwards to talk to participants, get to know them a little better. But then I just found myself kind of gravitating to like my friends. And that's something I've been struggling with, is that like I need to stop doing that, right? And start opening myself up and not closing myself off. And then, I think of specifically BIPOC events that include like all people of color. And I generally like have a tough time being in that space because I don't really know what to do. Right? It's
Mm.
like I told you at the beginning, I'm kind of a quiet person, and I can be, and I know this about myself, I can be kind of standoffish at times, and I'm really trying to fix that. If I'm in a guiding sense, I'm very much not standoffish, but it's just one of those ever evolving parts of myself. But like if I'm in a situation where I'm just very overwhelmed, I just my default is to just become very standoffish and like
Mm.
not want to deal with certain things. And it's something that I know, it's something that I've been working on, but I don't really know what I'm trying to say with this, but it's just like it's hard for me sometimes to be like, okay, we're at a BIPOC event and there's 70 people here. Do I have to talk to everybody? Do I just talk to the 3 or 4 black people that are there? Do I just talk to my friends who helped put this event on? What do I do? My default is I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to go do my own thing, which is detrimental in itself, right? That doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help anybody get to know me. I find it detrimental because I feel like I'm not helping in a sense. I'm not making the connections that I want to make. I'm not getting those mentees that I could potentially get to like eventually become leaders in the space. But if we're in a clinic, you can ask me any fucking thing that you want, and I'm going to be so caring and respected to who you are. I'm going to ask you questions. I want you to ask me questions. I'm going to like be so attentive to that person or that group. But when it comes to like after things, I'm just like, I don't know what to do. This is so
Mm.
overwhelming for me. I'm just going to go to my room and do nothing, or I'm going to go like for a walk and just get out of this. I I hate meeting new people, which is funny because like that's a guiding is a lot of just meeting new people. I shouldn't say I hate meeting new people. The anxiety that it induces for me is just to the point where like it takes so much mental energy. I just don't want to do it. I suck it up sometimes and I do it, but then sometimes I feel like I'm very standoffish because I'm using so much energy to even just be sitting at this table that like having a conversation takes even more mental energy. But like if it's something with like 8 people, right? Like we did a BIPOC intro to triad clinic a couple of weeks ago and we had 8 participants. And then, 3 other of my friends, we put it on. So much easier to like sit down at a table, talk, get to know people as opposed to like 70 plus people, right?
Yeah. I wonder if part of this is just like knowing yourself and knowing the environments in which you like thrive in. And then,
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of go with the mentality of, I'm going to go to a big networking event. It's okay to be standoffish here because I do organize these other smaller get-togethers where it's more my speed and things like that.
Yeah.
Like maybe cut yourself a break, right? Like
Yeah.
just
Like,
show up and
do they
do what you
even
can.
care? Do they even
Yeah.
notice? Right.
Okay. So if I can continue down this track, it kind of builds off what we've been talking about and this idea of identity and like sort of like a full expression of yourself, I guess, if I can put it that way. But what struck me about in another interview that you did in talking about growing up, you basically talked about like when you moved to the Boston area, Waltham, you sort of had this realization about you talked about how you felt like you were only able to express one part of yourself growing up, and then you sort of encountered this new environment and then this sort of awareness. It was probably there, but like it became much more, I guess, tangible perhaps. And I'm wondering, since moving, the question is, how have you been able to express your full self or a different self since moving?
As you mentioned in the previous interview, I mentioned that like, growing up in Connecticut, specifically Sellington, was just kind of like a white bubble. And anytime that if I expressed like an opinion based on a person of color or like myself or how someone should come about it, it would just come with ignorance. And I'm not saying anything bad about my friends at all. I love all of them. And some of my friends that I had in the past are no longer my friends now because I wasn't able to be my full self. And I think that comes kind of with growing. But when I moved to the Boston area, being able to have a more diverse community, I feel like I was able to express more of my feelings and my opinions about being a person of color, being in a more diverse community. Which, now saying that, I think because of my lived experience, being having the anxiety of it being different than somebody else's, like I now am like, why do I get anxiety over that when everyone else's lived experience is different? But it still allowed me to be the person who I probably should have been 10 to 15 years ago. Like, it's allowed me to have these conversations like I'm having with you, or like with my other friends of color, or even some of my white friends in the community. Obviously they don't have the lived experience of a person of color, but they understand, because of the diverse community they've been in, that there are these things that people need to talk about, and I can have these conversations with them. Where, like, back down in Sellington, I probably would never be able to have that conversation.
Getting back to guiding, because we've talked about how you're going through the guiding process, we haven't actually talked about like the accreditations that you have and like sort of like where you're going. So you have an SBI, you helped lead an ice climbing clinic, but I guess, like, where are you heading in this, and how is the process going, and where are you hoping to get with it?
Yeah, overarching goal is IFMGA guide.
Total. So like
Total.
ski, alpine, and rock.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It's going to be difficult, and I've said before, like, it's going to take a long time. But for me, I like to set lofty goals and then have like a lot of smaller goals in between there, just to show that I'm progressing for myself and not just get bogged down that, like, I can't do this. So where I'm at now is I had a whole plan, but it has now gone back a year, which is going to happen. Setbacks happen. But so next step is my rock guide course. So I'm taking that in September up in North Conway. Hence why I'm spending so much time at Cathedral. And a lot of anxiety has been coming out of that, because I like to, just put that kind of pressure on myself. And everyone has been like, it's a course. Just remember that. You're being taught these things. You don't have to exactly know them, which has very much been helping. Like, obviously knowing the concepts of certain things, but just know that you're going in there to learn things, not to show that you have mastered these things, which has helped me a lot. Grant, climbing with him past Monday, has really like helped me with that mindset as well. Same with Ted Teagarden. So I'm looking forward to that in September. And then I'm hoping that I can take the ice instructor course in the North Conway area. I want to say it's probably in like January, February, but I'm hoping to take that this year, or sorry, next year, the winter of 2025, because then that would help. That would allow me to, in the scope of practice, allow me to guide ice. Because with a single pitch instructor, there's some limitations to guiding ice. They don't assess your movement on ice, therefore they can't, like, you can't lead ice. You can set up a top rope, right? You can set up a top rope, that's fine, that you know how to do that. But ice instructor will allow me to actually like lead ice and guide it. The next step would also be taking the multi-pitch instructor course / exam, because that's all done in the same time. That scope just kind of changed as well. It used to be you were only able to guide 4 pitches. I think it's more aligned with, if you're a rock guide, like what terrain that you can guide in. And the reason for that is because I would like to become a single pitch instructor. Sorry, a single pitch. What is it? Provider.
I don't know. I don't know.
Single pitch instructor provider. There it is. So that wasn't really my goal initially for like short term stuff. All right, I will look at like 3 to 5 years, mainly because when I first go into something, I'm like, head on, like, we got to do this all right now. Mm-hmm. But then I think about going back to representation. They do a lot of these BIPOC SPI courses. There's a lot of Asian representation and other people of color, but there isn't, as far as I know, a Black SPI provider, especially in New England, right? That would be such a thing to have for people in New England, especially showing that like you can actually learn from someone who is certified to do this. Like that kind of came out weird, but it just seems like a logical next step for me to be able to do. So from there, then I would like to get my rock guide certification, go the Alpine course, though they just changed that a little bit, the Alpine guide track, and then eventually the ski track. I'm not too heavily stoked about the ski track. It's not my main priority right now, but I am a split boarder, but I might, and people might give me crap for this, I might buy a set of skis. We'll see.
It seems like such a better way to get down from the top of a mountain.
Yeah, it is. So I might like keep my split board set up if I want to like do resort laps, right? Yeah. Or I want to go up
That's
to
very
Tufts
exciting.
and just like screw around.
Save your knees.
Good point.
We always end with this question.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to give your younger self one piece of beta, and it could be for climbing, can be for life, it can be for anything, what would that be?
Oh boy. You know, I know you.
I know it sounds easy, but it's.
I know, and I know you asked this question, and it's the one thing that I've like been struggling to actually answer for myself. But I think the biggest thing is just go easy on yourself or myself. Don't take everything so to heart. Certain things, yes, but you know, when it comes to X, Y, and Z, like just go with the flow, and what happens happens, and then go from there.
Really appreciate you coming on and chatting, Jordan.
Yeah, Aaron, thank you. I really had a good time. Thank you for the chat.
Yeah, likewise. Jordan is an AMGA SPI and apprentice rock guide. If you'd like to hire Jordan for a guided day out, the easiest way is to get in touch via Instagram. He is at Revis Say What. So that is REVIS You can also find him at this year's Mount Washington Valley Ice Fest, which runs from January 31st to February 2nd. Lastly, Jordan is an ambassador for Arc'teryx Boston, Cypher Climbing, and Anu Gloves. We're big fans of Anu, so thank you very much, Anu. And Barn Door Hostel. As always, thank you to Hannah Noel for providing the intro music and Andrew Solomon for editing. If you've enjoyed this episode and others like it, because we are now in season 2 and this is episode 35, I believe. If you like it, be sure to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Thank ya. Okay, see you next week.